I want to thank all the panelists for not just being here this afternoon, but in fact for the time and preparation that they have put into getting ourselves ready for this conversation. We had a fantastic Skype call with most of the panelists. We've had a lot of conversation around what this topic means, and I certainly have really enjoyed it. So we're going to kick off, and I think the first thing that I want to say is I've certainly found, as we've been talking this morning, we've heard a lot of really great theoretical stuff. But for me, when we talk engagement, we're talking about people. And we're talking about what is in the hearts of the people who come to work every day. And so I'm going to try and make this session possibly a little bit more human. And to do that, I've asked the panelists to each introduce themselves in a very particular way. Muta is going to be just caught a little off guard here because I've changed the opening exercise and I didn't tell him. So we'll let him go last because he'll have the hang of it by the time the others have got into it. So a little bit of a curveball for him, but he's a rising star so he can think on his feet. I've just asked each of the panelists to share a very short, emphasis short, story about a time in their work history when they have felt most engaged, most satisfied, most as if this was really what they were supposed to be doing for the rest of their lives. So I'm going to ask Audrey at the end to kick off.
Good morning. I think I'm going to have a challenge with a short story. But to get at it, I studied economics, and after studying, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I ventured into the world. And I ended up in Rwanda. And while working there with local people doing micro-business development, I think one moment I really felt engaged was just after having a very informal discussion with a group of ladies about possibilities. We were taking, I think it was a rock that was in the street, and we just had that, I put it on the table and said, so what can we do with this? And at first they were looking at me and say, what are you talking about? But then just to start getting their minds going about possibilities. And after that session and after all of them could see more than what was just the obvious, and as I was walking home, I had that feeling, I haven't had it very often, only twice in my life, but I had that feeling like, so I think I've done what I should have done, I can now die. That complete feeling of satisfaction, and actually it wasn't a big thing, it was just like helping people to become better who they are. And the second one was in the corporate environment, where I was working with some of my colleagues who are doing community projects. So one of them are doing a feeding scheme in Secunda area, and he started feeding 15 children a sandwich every day, and today, 10 years later, he's feeding 1,500 children. So he's built a whole community project around that. And I was able to help him to establish a bakery so that they can supply their own bread. And the day I told him, like after all the due diligences and all the interviews and everything, and I said, but you have, he was talking about the future tense, like if and when we have the bakery, then this and this. And I interrupted him and I said, but what do you mean by when you do have it? And that moment when he realized, like, wow, he can actually do what he really wants to do, he started to cry, and I had that feeling again. Fun, that I've really made a difference to help people to do what they really want to do.
So Audrey, maybe you've already just said it, but what was it about those experiences that just touched your heart?
I think it was the fact that I could be in a position to leverage someone's dreams.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you. So just before I go on to Setlogani, I'm going to integrate the Q&A, as I said, and I also have got 3 tickets to give away for a breakfast that I'm running in November on the subject of resilience. And so at random moments, I'm going to ask a question of all of you, and we'll give away some of those breakfasts. So Setlogani, over to you.
Good afternoon. I guess given my role as head of corporate social investments, I always feel engaged, just on the back of what you've just said. But there are a number of moments, and there was one particular one, which was last year. Madiba had just passed on the night before. Got to work, life was not quite normal, we know, but I did not expect the kind of swift response that the executives within Investec kind of pulled off quite immediately. Within an hour or so, arranged a video conference across all our offices and had all our staff in one room just to celebrate and acknowledge what had just happened. And I guess the most important thing why I felt, one, I had an active role in it, which was meaningful in a sense, but I think it was the acceptance and acknowledgement that we're a part of society as opposed to apart from society. And it's a huge thing that keeps one engaged. And it wasn't a corporate social investment kind of exercise. It was just a sense that says, you know, we are in touch with what you're experiencing, we're in touch with what you're feeling, we're in touch with what a loss this, in many different ways this was to South Africa.
And that touched your sense of being a part of the broader society and of community, and that value inside of you.
And very proud to be associated with Investec at that point in time.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you. Brendan.
So great. Good afternoon, everybody. Well, I think if we talk about the whole topic of engagement, I think it's something that you also have to look for on a daily basis. Whenever you tackle any task, project, or assignment for that matter, is how do you tackle it so you can do it a little bit differently to ensure that it still intrigues you, and by finishing that project or task, you still get that sense of fulfillment, accomplishment. So it really feels like, or you really create the scene of continuous progress in your career. But I've had to really look at a particular instance where I thought, okay, well, coming from a technical background, where I really felt engaged with the work environment is straight after varsity, I joined ArcelorMittal as a graduate engineer, and I was fortunate enough to get onto a very big project, and with very little guidance and, like I say, the big, it's a project scope, I managed to look for a few different approaches to this project, saying, well, guys, we're not going to follow the day-to-day, there's more time to finish this, and really completing it within the time and budget, and really showing the people that it actually can be done, because it's become such a norm that there's a bag of excuses to really, you can finish everything, but you've got your ammunition to throw at the end of the day. So, and trying to finish it and seeing that I just finished varsity, it was really a sense of, well, I made the right choice. I made the choice in terms of employer, the career that I want to do, and I can actually do this. I think I'm set up for it, yeah. So I think it's a sense of work accomplishment at least.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So having a skill, having something to bring to the party, and having the opportunity to actually,
really
do
getting
that.
Work satisfaction at the end of the day. And,
Fantastic. Good. Thank you. So we'll skip Mute because we're going to just give him a couple more moments to think about his story and move to Nkuli.
Hi everyone. I hope I can make it short as well. My story is actually with my current employer. I qualified in architecture in 2000, the year 2000, and then I worked with the principal agent for Melrose Arch. And you know, every day when I went to work at the time, I was still taking taxis, and everybody just saw this huge big hole and all this construction going on, and they wondered where I'm going, because there were demolitions of all the buildings, and we were in the one building that is now, I think, the meat company in that house there. And it was always so gratifying now, even now, even with my mom when we drive past, to say, wow, you were at the center of that and nobody knew what was coming up or what you were doing. And that's what I like about what I do. It's corporate real estate. It's so tangible. You know, you walk away and you're like, wow, I was part of the creation of something like that. So that's always gratifying, and I take that through my life's journey. But when I started at Rio Tinto, my mandate was to find a suitable location for Rio Tinto to have a head office in South Africa and build that for them and make sure that it represents the company. Now, this is a multinational company. I got headhunted. I got interviewed via Skype, never met the manager. who was at the highest level and sits at head office. He interviewed me via Skype, took me in for the job, and told me you've got to hit the ground running. So you start receiving emails while you're still at the other job. So anyway, long story short, I come in, within a month, I've had to fly to London, he briefs me, and while I sat there in that boardroom, and it was a corner, like really like in the movies, like, you know, you watch a New York movie and people are sitting in these offices, and that moment touched my heart, and I thought, wow, if only my dad was here to see me. You know, I felt so big. And I came back, and he entrusted me with such a big job. I came back, the lease was coming to an end in like less than 12 months' time. Nobody told me that before I came. But anyway, I identified a place and a spot where we should go, and the construction wasn't done. So it was like, wow. So I really had to hit the ground running. I did it. 9 months later, Rio Tinto was set up in a AAA grade office. You can come see it anytime. People still pass there and think it's a hotel. People love working there. And my boss never set foot in South Africa. We had a review 12 months later, and everybody was settled in the office, and he said, I couldn't have chosen a better person to do this job. Thank you so much for delivering, and that I could trust you based on one call a week you could deliver. And just that heart-to-heart conversation of someone thanking you and trusting you that much with the job, you know. Further to that, you know, even employees, a few weeks later, I've had people say, you know, you always watch these beautiful offices on TV and you think, wow, I wonder what kind of people work in those environments. Thank you for creating such an environment for me to come to work into every day. Because space is a very personal thing. People come to work and they need to be motivated by what is around them as well, you know. And so I do love what I do, and I'm glad that I touch people's lives on a daily basis without them even knowing sometimes. But most of the time they do get to know, and they do come and acknowledge that.
What really stuck out for me, there were lots of things that you spoke about there, but I think the thing that really stuck out for me was what you said about what you were intimating about a legacy. There's a building that I've left behind. And just your reference to your dad, just that I presume that in that is that sense of, well, this is what your dad has left in you, the deposit that he left in you, and that was heartwarming. Awesome. So now Mute, on the spot.
Hi everyone, my name is Mute. I'm a business intelligence strategist for a company called P-Cubed. My experience has to do with what my peers have already spoken to, which is work satisfaction. 2008, I graduated from London Metropolitan University, come back home. I'm taking a gap month or two. Sitting at home in Midrand. I've got a friend I schooled with as well, who works for African Bank. He invites me for lunch. I join him for lunch. And this relationship is somewhat a relationship that was kind of written in the stars. I go join him for lunch, and guess what? I'm having an interview. I'm not prepared for the interview. It's an interview with the head of credit and the CEO, not now, the CEO of African Bank, previous CEO of African Bank. It's a shocker. I walk in there, they ask me a few questions, and weird enough, my dissertation a year before was around the questions that they were actually trying to pose to me. I aced that. 2 days later, I'm an African Bank employee. I joined them. I'm this young Gen Y who's very disruptive. No one wants me in their team because I've got a different way of thinking. I transition within the credit and risk departments, and then I find myself within a team that had just been formed that was tasked with moving the bank from a brick and mortar bank to a more digitized bank. So like this platform, it's very engaging, and somewhat expressive of legacy, because you're doing something that the bank traditionally wouldn't do because of its demographic. And odds are stacked against you. You're competing against the big four banks. We've got all the budgets. I'm tasked with running the project end to end. Successfully do that. 3-man team, develop a full-on suite for all their online offerings. And get the CEO's Merit Award for 3 years running. And for me, that just finding myself in that type of environment that's sort of incubating of creativity got me very engaged. I think I was very fortunate to have never worked for a company where I was disengaged. I started with a company that allowed me to harness the skill and mentored me through the journey. And then, I think for me, that's when I felt really engaged, satisfied somewhat with what I've done. I think, let me just keep it short and concise.
So it sounds like
Yeah.
it was a space where the very best of who you are was able to be showcased
Yes.
and used in a really positive way.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to stand up for a bit. Let's bring a little bit of different energy. And I'm going to ask the guys at the back just to put up one slide. We talk about this word engagement, and the word engagement has come up, I don't know, at least 50 times this morning in the conversations that I've been part of. So this is my thing. My company is called Engagement Dynamics. And so if you don't mind, I'm going to just take a couple of moments to quickly tell you what I understand engagement to be, and then we'll come back to the other questions in this context. So that slide may be a little bit small, but a simple definition of engagement is that engagement is about investment. Investment, when people choose to invest the best of who they are in pursuit of a worthy mission. That's my definition of engagement. And I think that there are 3 dimensions to that. The first is alignment with strategy. And what I just want to say there is we talk a lot about getting buy-in within our organizations. And I think that that's important. It's really good. But the reality is that individual people have strategies and goals and objectives as well. And engagement begins to happen when you get a win-win situation. When I, as an employee, feel that in as much as I'm helping you to achieve your goals, you're helping me to achieve mine. So that, in a nutshell, is what that alignment element is. Relationship with the system. Talks about relationship with people and relationship with the system in which you work. If you're the kind of person who really enjoys making sure that you achieve huge goals and that every single day all the items on your list get ticked off, it can be deeply frustrating to work in an environment that is not facilitating that, that's not allowing that, where other people are not meeting their deadlines. That impacts on you. That's just a little bit of an illustration of what relationship with the system is about. And then it's execution of service. And in the previous session upstairs, we were talking about a high-performance culture. And I found it interesting. I was doing a lot of listening in that space to hear how there was a lot of conversation around what makes me happy as a rising star. What is it that's going to attract Gen X and Gen Y and millennials and all these people into an environment? And there was a lot about a happy space. And I think that there is a difference between a happy space and a high-performance culture. I think there is a difference between happiness and engagement, because engagement has this element of productivity and the fact that we are here to execute service. We are here to do something. So those 3 elements are very important. We seem to have lost the slide. What's really interesting and often doesn't get talked of in the context of engagement, and we're going to pick this up just now in this conversation, is that engagement has to happen within a business context. It has to happen within an organizational context, which has 3 very distinct things as a part of this entity. Or that's not very well put, but ignore that. Competition, change, and complexity are 3 critical elements in the business environment which are not going to go away. It's what business is all about. It's a part of the system. And the trouble is that those 3 elements tend to disengage people because they introduce the risk of fear. Again, that was a conversation that came up upstairs. When people don't resist change, they resist pain and loss. And the minute we introduce an element of fear, people tend to disengage. They withhold their personal investment. And so within the context of that, one of the questions that we're going to address just now is the question of what are the paradoxes that somehow have to be managed when we look at this question of engagement. And we'll come back to that in a moment. So we're given responsibility. There's a trust element to that. Kuli also spoke about trust. I'm being entrusted with something that's important and maybe even a little bit bigger than me. But you're giving it to me and I get to showcase what I can do. Great, thank you. So the next question that I'm going to pose to the panelists, which I just need to find on the floor, is if you were looking to change your employer, and hopefully they're not, because I might be in trouble with their employers, if you were looking to a new employment situation, whether within your own organization or outside of it, what are the 2 or 3 things that you would be looking for in a new work environment? And I think we'll start at this end, if we may.
Okay. If I were to look for a different employer right now, it's an employer that's willing to go through a certain change and requires assistance with that change. I do like to work on exciting new projects. It does become a bit of a challenge when you've done that and now what's the next thing to do, you know? So I'd like to be with a company that's looking to implement something that I can help champion and move them to the next level.
Fantastic. So again, it's that big challenge.
Yeah.
That sense of movement, change, bringing what you've got. Fabulous.
Okay. I would be looking for a company that harnesses an environment that would be enabling for upward movement. So within the organization, not so bureaucratic, and communication across the different hierarchies is fairly open. So for me, that's key to effecting change in any business. You should be able to knock at a CEO's door and pitch whatever idea you think would give the business a leap towards the strategic intent.
Great.
Yeah.
I think what stuck out immediately for me as you started talking was, you're an ambitious man. You want to go places. And you know, we tend to think we value humility. But there is a sense in many of us, and particularly the people who are bringing most value, that we are also trying to get somewhere. It's back to that, what I was saying just now about alignment of what I'm trying to achieve with what you're trying to achieve. Stunning. Brendan.
Well, when I opened my discussion, I spoke about career satisfaction, and I think that's probably the first and foremost thing that I'll look for in a future employer, and that is really to ensure that I've got a challenging and meaningful work. I think typically, I think a lot of people here testify to that as well. As soon as you start performing, you easily fall into this rut of saying yes to everything. Yeah. So you get assigned responsibilities because people know you can take a massive workload and you can get things done. However, when you look back at it, it's not necessarily something that you're really proud of. So you end up with a massive workload of really trivial things that you've completed and accomplished. So I think that's probably the first thing that I'd want to, I guess, stay clear of. And then also is a company with a strong vision. And I think a lot of the time the vision and focus of companies get lost as soon as it comes into, when it comes to implementation, because everybody sits in these positions, they're all contributing to something, but they don't really know where they fit into this bigger picture. So I think also being involved in the energy and carbon strategy for Newcastle, I know where I want to go, and typically I also want to know where a company is going. Why do we have to, for what are we pushing this, I can say, why are we pushing this, let's say, goal and objectives then? Yeah, so how's it aligned with the strategy then? Yeah.
Awesome, thanks, Brendan. Silkhani.
I guess, again, very biased because of my line of interest. I would actually be wanting to ask, more the commitment in society of any business. I would be looking for a company that understands and appreciates that the sustainability and success of itself as a business lies largely in the sustainability and success of the communities within which it operates. And I would be looking at wanting to understand why it is that it's opted to contribute to society. Is it for PR reasons? Is it a compliance? Is it because that talks more to the heart and the key and core value of any entity?
Absolutely. So that was something that stuck out for me so strongly in our preparation, Setlhani, was your emphasis on contribution. And you have some beautiful little phrases that you use around that.
Yeah, I suppose the point is this, it's the acceptance that says we live within society, not of society. You can make the kind of money that you want to make, it's great, but you are within society and there's an element and an expectation. I talk of a social and political license to operate. You can't walk into any business and find this framed license to operate, but there's an expectation that as a corporate citizen of sorts, and you have that a lot now with these youngsters. I mean, I have a lot of people who are interviewed. I remember the other day I was called by Stephen Kossoff, who was interviewing a youngster, who said to the youngster, all things being equal, salary, shares, and everything else, what would be the deciding factor? And this youngster says, I have no appreciation of what you do for society. So you have a lot more interest today in a lot of your youngsters asking, I want more meaningful contribution. Yes, I want to make the kind of money. I want the kind of scope that you give. I want to kind of realize the kind of satisfaction. But I want to lead a life full of meaning. Youngsters who today form, at a very young age, groups of mentors of this or that, because they want to find a way of giving back themselves. And in today's age, a lot of the ones that we are recruiting are individuals who themselves have been disadvantaged previously, who appreciate wholly what it means to have been in a tight corner and have a sense of understanding the privilege that they now have. And owning up to the privilege comes with the sense of responsibility. And a place of employment needs to create the platform that embraces just that.
We're going to come back just now to Setlhani's sort of intimation here about different generations. And again, it was a conversation that came up upstairs, and we had a little bit of a debate telephonically last week, and maybe we'll raise that just now. Yeah. Just some different perspectives on exactly what he was saying. Audrey?
I would look for an employer who is able to be agile and relevant, because we live in a changing world, and we need to be ready to change according to be able to be relevant and to continue to be relevant. And then also an employer who has a holistic and integrated view, much on what my colleague here has said, to understand what is business role and responsibility within the society, and how can he manage the polarity of business drivers and societal drivers, to have that understanding, but also have an integrated and holistic view on employees, that they know that I come to work not just with my skills and my experience and my education, but I also come with my passions and my interests and my dreams and my hope to make a difference. And that if I only come to work and I'm only engaged on my skills and my expertise, then I'm disengaged, because you can't engage half of me and not all of me.
So I'm going to open it up again to the floor. One of the challenges is that employees come into the workplace with expectations, and we've spoken about some of your expectations in the Sasol conversation upstairs. We talked a lot about people's expectations. The challenge, I think, is that there are certain paradoxes that exist within the work environment that are sometimes very difficult to reconcile. So what I'm going to invite you to do, just a couple of you, is to think of a paradox that you've experienced in terms of this issue of engagement, and particularly engaging rising stars, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about engaging younger people. We're talking about engaging the leaders of the future. What paradoxes have you observed? And maybe just pose a question around one of those paradoxes to either one particular member of the panel or to the panel in general. So, who's got a question?
Ooh.
give you just a couple of moments to think. As soon as you're ready, I've got a bright light shining in my eye, so you're going to have to really make a big splash if you've got a question. I have somebody over there. Would you like to stand up, give us your name, and pose your question?
Hi, my name is Tseko Mokgotsi, and I'm very interested in what was it Mute, who's wanting to grow. It's an environment that grows and incubating for creativity, which I think is great because I can identify with that, that kind of mentorship. But yes, you come into an environment, you have all these plans, and the reality is you have to fit into the organization doesn't have to fit in with your plans. So the question is, what do you do in that situation? You have plans, but are you willing to be patient, to wait for the opportunity to be able to contribute to the growth of the company? Are you willing to wait?
Great question. You can have a breakfast ticket, Kathy. And Muti, you get to answer that.
Great question. I think yes. There's a yes and a no. It's one thing coming into a company and a company has got a structure, but I think you need to somewhat want to be involved in that process of change or effecting change. So being the change agent. If you go back to my snippet I gave, for me to get to a position where I was entrusted with all this work, I had to stick within the organization, move within different teams, because I was getting into a team, you get upskilled very quick learner, get upskilled, and you start posing those very hard questions around why are we doing things in a certain way? Why are we doing things in a certain way? I could have just packed my bags and went to Investec, but I found that within that organization I could relate with what they were trying to do, and I understood the person that they were trying to get to. So that person is my grandmother in Venda. So I know what their problems are. And I think I could be that agent to make their lives easier. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
So what I'm going to ask is for the rest of the panel, maybe you could just say just one or two words or just a sentence to say, what is it that you as a rising star can do to facilitate that happening, to be given those kind of opportunities? Brendan, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think maybe just before we go on is, I think there are two elements to the answer, and I agree that my second, let's say, leg to this answer would be exactly that. But the first part of also is there's a certain amount of respect that one also has to show to these structures. However, we work in we don't work in an environment that we created. We work in a bigger corporate environment. There are lots of regulatory requirements that has to be met. So to an extent, one also have to respect it and find your way, because it best be in that environment. Yeah. And then secondly is look at the next point is then saying, okay, I know what are my limitations now, but I can start facilitating this process of change then. Yeah.
Yeah. I think also, be that change that you want to see in the environment. So it also has to start with you. If you're trying to bring in a culture that is different to what the company has, understand what the company culture is first and foremost, but don't get upset if it's not changing at the pace that you want to change it. Bring people along with you. Take them along with you and make them understand why that change is necessary. And therefore you are able to better effect that change and have more cooperation around that change, But the one thing about leaders, and leaders are not everyone. You get managers and you get leaders. Leaders are those who will think out the box, move you to the next level. And we have to have those people who move us to the next level, and that next level does require that change. So be that change agent that is required and take people through it with you. So I think perhaps the process in which you do it is what will make it a positive one or not so positive one. Yeah.
So I think in summary, of that, what really sticks out there is the notion of being conscious and intentional about your own influence. Recognizing that as a leader, with or without title, you have influence, and you choose how to use that. Lovely, nice point. I'm going to ask you guys to hold it because I think there might be some more questions and maybe you guys can answer those. Who else has got a question? Right at the back, Sam.
So one of you, my name is Sam Alexander, I'm from the Pacific Institute. So one of you wanted an organization with a clear, probably bold vision. So how would you help the organization delete the vision from the screensaver, scrape it off the walls, and etch it into the hearts of the people in the organization?
So Sam, may I try and interpret the paradox that I'm hearing, which is that we speak about a vision, but it doesn't necessarily get embedded in people's hearts. There is a disconnect between what we say and what we do. Is that right? Great. Audrey?
Yes. How I would answer that question, or how I think about it, is of course we have all been appointed in a certain position and we have certain deliverables, which all ties up to the company vision. So before we can start being influencers or start connecting hearts or whatever, we need to deliver. We need to deliver with excellence on our jobs and what is expected of us. And even go beyond that. If you need to deliver 10 elements, go for 12 and be excellent in what you do, because we first need to have credibility. And we cannot just move into a company and start making demands and wanting to change things. We are in a system. But in your area of the system where you have influence, first I would say be excellent, and then when you have proven your results and your deliverables and you have some credibility, I think at that stage you can start engaging on a relational level. First you sort out your positional level and you do what you have to do, and then after that you engage in a relational level. And I think that is just like be who you are, and share and encourage and assist people and bring create an environment for your colleagues to bring their hearts to work, if I can put it that way, to be authentic. But before we can get there in the environment we are, we first need to deliver. Tick, 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 1, 2, 3, and then we can engage.
Nkuli definitely has something to add.
Just from a practical point of view, what Rio Tinto does, one of their main visions and what is core to their values is health, safety, and environmental sustainability. And how do we, obviously in the mining sector, there's a high rate of accidents and people going home with injuries, or, so is in the construction sector and everywhere else. But what the company has managed to do is to say, before every meeting, so we have all the health and safety placards on the walls, but how do we live that, So every meeting you go into, you start having a share on safety, health, well-being, environmental. And people start off that way. Any new employee that comes into the company gets this message, and so it doesn't matter what it is you want to talk about. So if it's excellence that you are striving for as a company, you can say every time we are gathered in a room of more than 2 people coming into a meeting, let's share some ideas of how we can be excellent, or how we can bring excellence and innovation in what we do. So in our case, it's health, safety, and environmental shares. So I will share something about safety or health or well-being, and people start to talk about the subject, and everybody does that, and that becomes second nature, and that forms part of the culture that we actually live by and not just read when we are in the lift on a piece of paper. So that has really helped, and everybody is so much more conscious. Even when visitors come into our building, they can see it, feel it all around them. But then again, from a corporate real estate point of view, I always say the design of the building itself, some of those aspects of design should also translate the company's values and bring in, when you walk into a building, you need to know, okay, this company is a creative company. just by the sense of what surrounds you, you know. So you can do it through your design, you can do it through, having shares together.
I have a favorite phrase which I think I coined myself, but I use it all the time, and that is, everything speaks.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when it comes to organizational engagement, I think it's very important for leaders at every level of an organization to be so aware of the fact that everything is communicating, not just the emails, not just the things that are on the wall, but absolutely everything, from the building to the state of the toilets to whatever. Setlhogwana, you
I
wanted to
actually
add
wanted
to
to
that?
jump in because the late professor in business, Samantha Kashal, speaks of a smell of a place.
Yes.
And he compares it to going to India, down Calcutta, and says, when I go there in summer, it's too hot, and the smell of the place is so draining and whatever. And he compares it to going to a forest in France where the birds are singing, and it's the smell of the place. And that the smell of a place contributes to whether people are happy, can be productive, and so on and so forth. And the question you ought to ask in progressing within any organization is, what's my contribution to the smell of this place? And you've got to find that contribution. You've got to find that piece that's just so you. And it's just about being entrepreneurial. You know, we talk of an entrepreneurial flair and spirit. And that's just looking for a gap and a niche and making sense of it because it talks to you. Find that which you're so passionate about, be so good at it, that it becomes difficult for the rest of the organization to ignore you. You've got to do it.
And be as passionate about it as Setlhogwana. Your passion is contagious. We are already nearly out of time, believe it or not, and I'm going to combine two last questions and ask that we look at the theme of today, which was engaging the future. And I'm going to ask you to look at two things in a final comment from each of you. So, we've talked about making a contribution to society. I know Brendan, in some of his research, was beginning to think about how do we fit into the National Development Plan that we were speaking about earlier.
The national agenda at the end of the day.
The national agenda. The fact, as Setlhogwana said, we are a part of a society. So think about it in that context. So how do we as leaders engage the future? But I want to ask you particularly to comment on the fact that rising stars, whether they are acknowledged as rising stars, as the five of you have been, or whether they are unacknowledged within our organizations, can be disruptive, may make waves, may not always be very comfortable to have around. And so what I want to ask you to address is, how can we be constructively disruptive in terms of engaging the future of South Africa? Engaging as stars in that future. And I'll ask you each to just comment on that, and then I'll wrap up, and we're done for lunch. And Brendan, you're already looking like you have something to say.
Yeah, when I think of this answer, it was actually one of the topics that we discussed during our breakaway session, and you know, it really, the role of CSI at, like I said, getting profit from CSI investments. And I mentioned there during this breakaway session, how do we actually fit into the national agenda of the country? Because we all mentioned earlier that we want to contribute to the community that we operate in, and organizations really need to realize that they operate in a broader context than just their factory or their business there. So how do we contribute to the community, the country, the planet at the end of the day to really address what's the national agenda issues? Like, for instance, our Gini rating, South Africa's got the highest Gini rating in the world. So we've got the biggest inequality in the world. So how do corporates come together and say, well, guys, we need to address this? And in the sense of being disruptive, it's at the end of the day, businesses are here to make money, and we have to look at the earnings. And this goes a bit against your original gut feel that, it's a cash outflow that we're not necessarily going to reap the benefits of immediately. But if you look at it from a sustainable future point of view, then you need to realize that these communities really support your success going forward. So, I think it's really taking a stance saying, well, we might not see the benefits now, But we really need to drive these things and, like I say, come to the national agenda then.
Awesome.
I do think we need to be disruptive. We cannot maintain the status quo. We ought to ask the uncomfortable questions. And sometimes people think we should be apologetic about making money from other people who are more disadvantaged. There's a lot in social enterprise. There's a lot that we're not tapping into. In South Africa today, if we just put different lenses on and said there are so many different challenges, and within them, there are business opportunities. There's no harm in developing society and making money in the process. There's nothing wrong with that. And I don't think we as business are thinking long and hard about that. And even the rising stars themselves that are occupying meaningful positions are starting to think, how do I look at, I drive home to Limpopo every single day, every single month at least. And every time I get there, I can't help but think, every single challenge that's here, there must be a solution to it. But it's just how we think. So the different lenses that we really need to kind of say, the way of that we've kind of approached investment banking in the past is great. We've made money from it. We'll continue to make money from it. But there's another avenue that will make more of a meaningful contribution in the process. And it's not CSI. It's not check writing.
Another of my favorite quotations says that you should look for big problems because they disguise big opportunities. And I think you've just so eloquently said that. And I think the greatest opportunities lie when we can find ways to resolve these paradoxes, where we can solve two problems at the same time. Awesome. Audrey.
I would like to answer that question with a question. Sorry. Excuse me. The question is, to whom are we disruptive, and why do they find us disruptive? Maybe you can look it from the other way around, of young, engaged, professional people entering the workplace and finding the workplace disruptive for making a real difference. And I'm sure none of us will find each other disruptive. We will just see how we can fully have an integrated approach for adding value, not just in terms of making profit, but sustainable value in society, of which profit making is one segment. So the question of making disruptions goes both ways.
Nice. Provocative. Thank you. Muti.
I think disruption is a very interesting topic, but just to sum it up, I think there needs to be a paradigm shift within organizations. Organizations have to stop thinking of a top-down approach where you find a senior manager is giving instructions from the top to the bottom. What needs to happen is you need senior managers that are going to facilitate for creativity and employee empowerment, which then leads to the engagement, which is a direct function to higher profits and greater social being.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we see this in a lot of countries. Silicon Valley, for instance, you're finding very small companies, 3 young men, right, who go against the odds, create a company within 2-3 years that is worth a size of a GDP of a small country. So I think that we need to inculcate that within organizations.
Right, thank you. Nguli, last word from you.
I think speaking of national agendas, it is very important to always think of ourselves in a larger setting, in a bigger setting than ourselves. And certainly transformation, for me, comes to the fore. We hear government wants to make sure that there's transformation, but how do the corporates come along, and what is their contribution to that? And what is their contribution in transforming their organizations internally, and what is their contribution in transformation with regards to their supply chain in the long run, because that's where all this job creation comes in, and entrepreneurship can be harnessed as well. I think also on a more global scale, we need to start talking and focusing on sustainable development goals. That is the direction in which the world is moving, and we need to align ourselves and start thinking in the long term. Climate change is a reality. How do corporates actually see themselves fitting into that picture. Carbon emissions taxes are coming up sooner. They're thinking about those things. So it's not just about driving the rands and cents, but as you do so, how do you do so sustainably? How do you do so with the future in mind? And all of what my colleagues here have put across. So they shouldn't be linear in the way in which they do their business, but start thinking of the bigger picture. So young leaders, rising stars are people who are looking for that holistic picture. You know, I'm not just about one thing. How do I do this one thing, but doing it right and making a bigger impact? Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Well, thank you, everybody. Sam, you get a breakfast. I think I just want to wrap up with a couple of thoughts, and I want to touch back on this intergenerational question. And I've been thinking long and hard. I get annoyed with cliches. I find them very irritating. So as soon as everybody says, yes, but we're just two different generations, I question that. And I've thought a lot about what is the difference between their generation and my generation, because I'm kind of just over 50. And I want to play a meaningful contribution in my society, play a meaningful role. I want all the things that they say they want and think that I don't want. And I think that there are two fundamental differences, and this ties in with this notion of engagement. I think, first of all, that this generation knows a lot more and has access to an awful lot more knowledge, skill, ability than previous generations have had. It gives them more opportunity. It gives them more to contribute than possibly older generations might have had. The other thing that they have is a lot more choice. And they, more important than that they have choice, they are conscious of the fact that they have choice. And so come back to my definition of engagement. To create an engaging environment is to create an environment where people choose to show up and bring the very best of who they are in pursuit of a worthy mission. So on that note, thank you so much to all of the panelists. Thank you for your contribution and for listening patiently. And I think Ashwin is probably going to let us go to lunch. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
We'll step in.